Good morning. You are watching Issues at Hand on Church of Uganda Family TV. My name is Bruno Edgar. Welcome to this morning's discussion. Now, Issues at Hand is proudly brought to you by Protea Hotel Entebbe. Yes, for those of you who are planning your weddings this year, it's a very nice venue for your reception. And then for those of you who are planning conferences this year, yes, you can make sure that a Protea Hotel Entebbe is a place for you to have your conference. So make your reservation and booking today by calling the number on your screen, and trust me, you will not be disappointed. We have one of our guests on Issues at Hand last year went to Protea Hotel Entebbe for Christmas, and they had a stock and great reviews about it. So your review will be fantastic as well. Just make your reservation and booking today. Now, on today's discussion, we are talking about matters Kampala City, as there's a lot that is going on, a smart city campaign, and then KCCA has come out to tell us that there are roads that are going to be refurbished and worked on this year when it comes to Kampala. And so we have a lot of questions as city dwellers, and we need answers. And today our guest is going to provide some of those answers, or all of them, you never know. And so my guest for today is Mr. Simon Peter Kasyate, who is a spokesperson of Kampala City, Kampala Capital City Authority, that's KCCA. Welcome to Issues at Hand this morning.
Thanks, Bruno. Thanks for hosting me. Good morning to your viewers, and a Happy New Year to all of them.
Happy New Year to you too.
Cheers.
And from what we are hearing from KCCA, especially from the Executive Director, we have a Happy New Year lined up for city dwellers indeed, but it's going to come with there's still a lot of confusion, a lot of questions that are being asked, and so hopefully by the end of the program today, all these questions will be answered. Now, for those of us who may be new in the city or who might not know KCCA very well, we would like you to take us through the mandate of KCCA.
Well, it's a long mandate, but to simply put it, it's that KCCA was created by the KCCA Act of 2010, which gives KCCA the governing authority to run affairs of the capital city on behalf of the central government. Simple as that. So what we have is we've got the technical wing, headed by the executive director, who runs the city technically from 10 different directorates. Directorate in Treasury Services, Directorate for Gender and Community Services. We have one in legal. We have another directorate in public health. We have one in physical planning, and the like. Now, we run affairs of the city in that regard to ensure that there is every well-being. You can think about anything regarding our well-being in the city. KCCA is mandated to handle that. Then, of course, on the political side, of course, this is a country that is governed on the premise of democracy, and we abide by the first article of the Constitution, which clearly stipulates that power belongs to the people. And so, who exercises power through elected leaders? So, at KCCA, we've got a council headed by the Lord Mayor here at City Hall, with different levels of councillors. It permeates down up to the village level, but we've got councils at LC5 and councils at LC3, which are division councils. So that's why we are calibrated in that manner. Kampala is divided into 5 divisions, as you may well be aware. There is Nakawa, there is Central, where you are currently located, there is Kawempe, there is Machindye, and the other one being
Rubaga.
Very good. So you see, you know your civics are very well. So that's how we operate in the city by and large, really, to cut the long story short.
Oh, fantastic. So indeed, you are the right person to talk to about some of these issues. Now, whenever we are starting a new year, we always have new expectations, new resolutions, but it's important to start the new year also by looking back about what happened in the past year. So I would like you to take us through some of the achievements that were registered by KCCA as we plan to look forward come the new year 2023.
I wouldn't want to point at what we have done in the past and call them achievements without indicating the fact that whatever we do is a going concern. It's work in progress. I mean, there's fixing a road, but that road, if you have fixed it, for example, those who live on Kulambiro Ring Road, to them it's a great achievement, But to KCCA, it's a going concern because it's a great boulevard, yes, but it requires constant maintenance. It requires cleaning, desilting of drainage channels and everything. So for us, it is a going concern. And when we finish one road, we are on to the next and the next and the next. When we install street lights, to the city dwellers, that's a wonderful installation, great lighting and all that. But to KCC, it's a huge challenge. Maintenance, keeping them away from vandals, because you know that even where we install lights, we Kampalans have also learned the uncanny behavior of dismembering those installations, stealing them outrightly. I'm sorry to use this word on a family TV of Christian values, but I think it's important for us to acknowledge the vices in us as city dwellers and also handle them with the greatest condemnation that they deserve. So when we look back at 2022, you recognize that in the last quarter of the year, the country was hit by a pandemic, Ebola. And this comes in at the heels of COVID that also debilitated us for more than 2 years. And Kampala being the terminus of all form of communication and transportation. I mean, all roads lead into the city, all roads lead out of the city. These pandemics are communicable diseases. In other words, they are spread from one person to another through various ways. That this city did not shut down, especially during the Ebola outbreak. In fact, right now, we can comfortably say that we have now Ebola free, because according to epidemiologists, when you go 42 days in a row without registering any single suspected case, not even confirmed case, but suspected case, then you can as well say we are free of that pandemic. And I think Kampala has gone through that. Why? Because KCCA, through our Directorate of Public Health and Environment, has been at the forefront of ensuring that we fight together with the bigger effort through the Ministry of Health and the government on the wall to try and ensure that we avert a catastrophic incursion of this pandemic in our capital city. Kampala is an interesting city. It has got about 1.5 residents, yes, but during the day, those that flock into the city almost come to about 5 million people. Now you can imagine that level of physical interaction, that level of commercial engagement, that level of the hustle and bustle. If there is a case of such a debilitating incommunicable disease such as Ebola, would shut down the city, and you know what that means. Over 60% of the country's GDP is generated here in Kampala. When you shut down Kampala, you've literally shut down the country. As someone once said, and Kankan said, Kampala is the sitting room of this country. So that we kept the city afloat, that we kept us healthy, and we of course didn't do it alone. We did it with the compliance of the city dwellers, for whom we are very grateful, and that we encourage them to always heed by our communication when we share it out to them. But be that as it may, we've also carried out a number of engagements, especially with developments within the city. Yes, we may have had a few cases where you had buildings collapse in the city. That's not because KCCA is not doing its work, but it's to say that many people, when they get approvals from KCCA, they get right approvals on paper, they go on the ground and try to cut corners. It is not a very commendable conduct by many of us as a country, and I believe that folks like you've got a platform on a TV that hinges its operations on preaching good moral turpitude, is to ensure that we tell people to always be honest. When you are dishonest, it leads to that. We've tried to ensure that the city doesn't sink under the weight of floods, in as much as, yes, when it rains for 5 minutes, many places in the city get flooded because of challenges regarding our drainage. But the challenge is not so much because KCCA does not clear out these drainages, or does not in fact have drainages in the first place. But Bruno, you have seen on occasion very disturbing scenes of a mineral water bottle being thrown out of a window of an expensive car. You have seen in your own neighborhoods, neighbors having the courage to pick a sack of rubbish from their homes and dumping it near the drainage channel of the neighborhood. That indiscriminate, and I hasten add, I'm sorry to use this terrible word on your program, but I must use, barbaric way of living in the city sometimes is what causes us the kind of problems that we face. I mean, when you're indiscriminatively throwing away rubbish anywhere, that rubbish ends up somewhere, sadly, in those drainage channels. When it rains, the natural flow of water is hampered, hence the flooding, and that destabilizes movement of people, destabilizes even just the mere cosmetics of our city, it destabilizes so much more.
And it claims lives as well.
You have also, absolutely, you have seen this city is a beautifully set up city. Initially it was on long 7 hills, but I think it has expanded to more than 7 hills. But for every hill there is a valley. Most of these valleys are populated with wetlands. These wetlands are God's natural way of ensuring that runoff water is sipped right into the lake. Gladly, we are a lakeside city. What have we done to these wetlands? We have encroached on them in such a manner that when you have an area view of a swamp like Chinawataka Swamp, you'd want to weep, because we have simply filled it up with maram and constructed houses there. But let's not forget, you can't cheat nature. The Baganda say, amazi gakurukutira we gakurukutiranga. You may do whatever you want to do, reclaim a wetland, but when the chance for water comes to use where it has always moved, it will certainly use that. And so it's the flooding. So we've had those challenges, but we continue to enforce where we can. We continue to preach mindset change, to say, Bruno, of what use is it making quite some bucks from waking up so early in the morning to do a decent job? And when you need to buy a building or to buy a property in the city, you're buying it and locating it in a wetland that's supposed to help sieve and breathe the city. You are clearly cutting a branch on which you are standing. What else have we been able to do? You know that this city, KCCA, runs over 79 schools in this city. And I want to believe that all our schools have been operational. They started off, of course, with the hangover from COVID lockdown, but they have been operational. Our candidates did sit PLE, and you could say in very difficult circumstances that at least business went back to normal. In the area of revenue collection, we continue to collect some revenue and remit to the public purse. There is a great public order that we try to enforce amidst very difficult circumstances through our enforcement teams. We also, by and large, to just encapsulate our achievements really, is that the ED guided, and we agree with our family and are behind her in support, to say, let us run a smart city campaign. What is a smart city? It is not so much about there being not a single speck of dust on our roads, but it is also the culture of how we behave as city dwellers. How do we, for example, as KCCA, ensure that technology mixed with impeccable infrastructure to support it then gives a good well-being for the people of the city? So we've used the acronym of TIP: technology, infrastructure, and people's well-being. What do I mean by technology? Previously, if you needed to pay for a trading license, you need to line up at one of our offices, under the scorching sun, and then every process is manual and the like. But we are saying, look, we can leverage with financial institutions, of which we have done, and ensure that this is done at the comfort of wherever you are, on your palm of your fingers, using your mobile phone. That you can have your building plan submitted online, and you follow through the process of its approval till it finally gets out, without the hassle of working things through manual engagements. We have developed a number of applications, and that comes into the technology and infrastructure part, where there is so much in terms of service delivery that you should be able to get from your city administrators without necessarily having to physically being there, wasting man hours and wasting your time and energy to find. And all this is geared at ensuring that we have a proper city for which you, Bruno, our incredible viewers, and everyone else is happy to live in and work in. And that is our continuous quest.
Wow, that's fantastic, and there are a lot of issues there that you've tackled, and we're going to get into so many of them.
So again, for infrastructure, of course, I know that is the elephant in the room. Everyone is saying, but what infrastructure are you talking about when city roads are pothole riddled and the like? And I'm saying, yes, without a doubt, city roads, many of them are in a state that you wouldn't say is commendable. But again, I know there is a little bit of a drop in the sea of dissolution, a drop of goodness that has been able to be bestowed unto us. If you're the kind that has driven on Ntinda 2 Road, for example, stretcher, you have used Acacia Avenue, you have been to Lukuli, or you have visited a friend on Entebbe Road and you've used the Reza Kabusu Road, you'll agree with me that there's quite a bit of some good work that has been done. A lot more remains to be done, and subsequently, if you please, I'll be sharing with you what plans we have.
Actually, that's the next point that we are tackling now. Following the challenge of some of the pothole-riddled roads that we have, as well as the poor drainage systems that we have, there is a plan this year to get many of those roads worked on and the drainage systems worked on as well. Tell us a bit more about those plans.
Before we get down to the plans, maybe I just need to create some level of context for city dwellers to appreciate where we're coming from. It's not that this current administration, and people have joked on social media, I've seen the jokes and I can't help but laugh, that looks like we have a team from KCCA or wherever, God knows where, who wake up every single night, not even morning, wake up every single night to dig a new pothole in the city. So it looks like all of a sudden, these potholes are not happening naturally, but they are possibly being dug up for whatever reasons they are. Truth of the matter is no. Our city roads, many of them, have had their fair share of service. This city has 2,100 kilometers of roads in terms of the total network, including that little road from your gate to your main road. I don't know where you live, but that is also factored into 2,110. Of these, you won't believe it, Bruno, less than 700 kilometers has tarmac. The rest, the 1,300 or the 1,400, is just marl. Of the 700 that has tarmac, which includes Kampala Road, some of these roads, more than half of these roads, were last tarmacked properly, or even worked on, or built over 30 to 40 years ago, older than you. Now, roads engineers will tell you that 20 years really is the maximum a road can take, even with regular steady maintenance. Now, many of our roads have lacked one regular steady maintenance, and I'll tell you why. But also importantly, they have outlived their lifespan. So no amount of patching, echiraka upon echiraka, nothing is going to make that road smoothly appear like a boulevard you should be proud of to have in your capital city. So what has KCCA's current management decided to say? Look, let's do whatever it is to ensure that we overhaul some, if not all these roads, depending on budget availability. I'll tell you what, Bruno, would love to ensure that all the 2,100 kilometers of road is paved. Just like I'm sure you have got 1,000 needs. If I gave you, for example, $1 million right now, in the next 50 minutes, you wouldn't even find a trace of it. You would have solved what the problems you have are, but you'd still remain with other problems glaring at you. So what would you have done? You would have done prioritization. So yes, we have a number of city roads that require total overhaul. Government was magnanimous enough to sign out a loan with the African Development Bank of about 288 million US dollars. And from this amount of money, we optimized it, carried out designs, and have chosen at least about 30 roads, totaling to about 69.7 kilometers of roads to be rehabilitated, that is totally overhauled, and others to be upgraded. Those that are in bad shape, upgrade them and all that. And these roads are scattered across our 5 divisions. We have designed them in such a way that the kind of work that we're going to do unto them, you will be left with awe. Because some of them are going to be expanded. For example, Old Port Bay Road, Spring Road, and Port Bay Road are going to be dual. What do I mean? They're going to have 4 lanes, 2 lanes on either side, with an island of green, with street lighting, with signalized junctions. The idea of having roundabouts, because we've discovered from our engineering that roundabouts are a major choke point or bottleneck in terms of traffic flow. So what we are doing is, and we've worked with our partners from the Japanese development agency JICA to ensure that we signalize most, if not all, our junctions in the city in such a manner that we are able to automatically regulate traffic flow without having to be this kind of first come first serve basis that roundabouts tend to bestow onto us. And let's also not forget that much of what you see in the city in terms of traffic gridlock is not so much because the roads are narrow or bad or the cars are so many. No, we also know for a fact, if we had to do an introspection, if you are watching me right now this morning and you drive a car, and I'm sure a majority of you drive cars, be honest with yourself and tell us when you actually went to a certified driving school and got yourself a proper certification. Most of us get our certification for driving after acquiring our cars and driving them on the road without learning, without certification. So it's a city filled up with mainly learners on the road, and what you see as chaos is largely because it's one huge driving school without an instructor. Everyone is just trying to figure themselves out. pepper that in with some kind of border infusion, and you have the total chaos that you have now. When the roads are bad, exacerbates the problem. We cannot deny that, but certainly a solution is coming through. So yes, back to the African Development Bank project. This project begins in earnest this year, 2023, to bestow unto us 69.7 kilometers of roads. Now, when I say 69.7 kilometers against the backdrop of 2,100 kilometers, one will say, but that's a drop in the ocean. Yes, but we have to start somewhere. Also, 67 kilometers in the city are many roads. Let's now use numerical figures. The Winton Road is less than 0.3 kilometers. 5th Street Industrial Area is 0.8 kilometers. 6th Street is about 1.8 kilometers. So the entire 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th Street Industrial Area is less than 10 kilometers. But you can see the magnitude of area if you worked on those roads, what it will look like. And yes, those roads are in a terrible state now, and that will be sorted out. They are part of this project. Salama Road is supposed to be one of the longest roads on the project. It's about 8 kilometers, and that's one of those roads that we're going to work on. And beyond just working on the roads, I have heard people say that, yes, we like the roads, but it looks like the unit cost per kilometer is a bit inflated. Of course, when you say it's inflated, the onus is on you to tell us what then it would have costed if it was not inflated. You don't just simply say it is inflated and you walk away. The maxim in law is clear. When you allege, if I say Bruno is mad, it should not be Bruno to come out and say I'm not mad. I who alleges that Bruno is mad must be able to put on the table an envelope containing every proof. A letter of confirmation of your madness from a certified psychiatric hospital like Bulago, like Butavika. If needs be, evidence in terms of video or audio to show your madness and everything. Not you. So he who alleges must prove. So I have, for the most part, challenged those that have alleged to prove, to tell us what the market rates are and everything. Because what they are doing is simplistically getting the total amount of money for the project and dividing it by the total number of kilometers. But I'll tell you what, Bruno. A road like Sentema is 80% over a swamp. So you expect that the unit cost for a kilometer over a swamp like in Sentema is going to be the same like working on 6th Street Industrial Area, which is on land?
No, that's not the case.
Absolutely. For the most part, we've had many people donate part of the space they have to the land project. We've talked to landowners and say, look, rather than compensate you, we will, you give us the land, we'll break your wall, but we shall build it back. So there are instances where, yes, you've not compensated somebody, but you are building some part of his infrastructure that you have broken. You've seen a number of times people, KCCA and our contractors, building perimeter walls and other installations that we have, we extended the wall, so to speak. But then we also have those in our city who have said, no, this is my land. If you're going to pass here, it's for the greater public good, but you must compensate me. We all cannot be as good as Bruno is here. So we've had people we've got to compensate. That is also a cost. And you know what the market values are for compensation in the city. But beyond that, Bruno, the scope of this project is wider than just bestowing unto us tarmac roads. Let me furnish for you what the road will look like. I already hinted on signalized junctions, street lighting, impeccable drainage. It must be better than what we have at the moment to avert the problem of flooding. But guess what? We're going to have bus terminals. Part of this project is going to create 6 roadside markets for women and other vendors, because we are looking at the element of inclusion. We're going to have skilling center for youth and women. There's going to be 30 public toilets as a result of this project. 30 public toilets. You will agree with me that if nature's call found you in some parts of this city, the best thing you can do, Bruno, is lean against a tree, look around left, right, and center. If no one is seeing, then you deposit there. That's not the way people should live in a city. Okay, just because we guys know you can always send it by Bluetooth. You stand and take a short call. What about our female counterparts? How they do it? So we are cognizant of that, and part of the project is to create that level of places of convenience in these places, and that is part of the project. Now, when you simplistically get the total cost and divide it by the number of kilometers and say, oh, it's 15 billion per kilometer, where is that in the world? A road is being built in the part of the world where there are public toilets cannot cost the same as here in Uganda. There was also an element as part of this project to bestow unto us 50 50 eco-friendly buses as part of the project to the city. We were guided by the president when we were discussing the final details of the project to say, look, we already have companies in Uganda that are able to produce eco-friendly buses. Let them do that, we'll pay them at later stage. But this money from ADB, instead of going to buy buses from Nether, let us build more roads. So more roads were added onto the 69.2. You know which these roads are? Some of them. The Chitezi Road, they infamously, terribly designed, or whatever it is, Chitezi Road. It's about 10 kilometers. There is this road on Old Chira Road that comes from the Kamwocha market down into the valley, goes past Firebase, down in the valley going up. That is going to be part of them. You know that it's an incredible road from Old Chira Road police station up to the Kabira Junction. World class, right? But from Kabira to Ntinda,
it's terrible by the way.
That's going to be part of it. So when you get the Ntinda lights and you're headed towards Kisasi, you know that somewhere you get into hell. So that hell is going to be brought back to the state of heaven as part of this grand project. But this is not all we're going to be doing. But just before we go into others, these projects, commencement will start, give and take, February this year. Average duration, 30 to 40 months. Do your mathematics, that's already like 3 years. Yes, you'll argue, but why should these roads take so long? I used to have that kind of concern. Why should such short roads take so long to be completed in the city? But the engineers will tell you, look, Simon, we are building these roads without shutting down the city. People are going to be using these roads as we build them. So there's going to be that kind of inconvenience, there's going to be diversions, there's going to be distress. And to factor all that in will take a longer time. I've argued with them, then why don't you build at night? They say, you see, Simon, to build at night will require the kind of lighting that is going to create the same impact as daylight, so that we don't make a mistake and our engineers don't do the right thing on the ground and you say the roads were built shambolically. The amount of energy cost, the amount of electricity bills you'll have to run for that night operation would increase the cost per kilometer, which we are already complaining is too high. So against that background, we say, well, we are a country gifted by nature. At least we have sunlight for not less than 10 hours during the day. Let's use those 10 hours in these difficult circumstances and run for 30 to 40 months. We said, Kari, let's go ahead and see how best we can run it. Do you feel some hope? Or
yes, I feel some hope. That's
as hopeless as you were before you walked into the studio.
That's why I think you are, like I said, you're the right man to explain all this. And that brings to the point that in some of, when it comes to government projects, sometimes the reasons why we have many questions is because we don't have enough sensitization on how these projects are going to transpire. And I'm grateful that you've broken it down for us, that you even told us more than we knew when it comes to the public toilets and the more new additions that will be added as
absolutely,
a result of these
Bruno.
projects.
You know, many folks, and this not say they are ignorant, but I think the onus is on us to explain. Project development in later days, in this modern era, you do much more than just doing. Previously, before I came to KCCA, I used to work for a government agency that is currently building electricity generation facilities. I'll give you an example. The Karuma Dam itself costing $2 billion US. Someone actually argued and said, but how can one dam of 6 turbines cost $2 billion US? So he divided 2 billion by 6 turbines and said, can you imagine the cost of one turbine is going to be so much? No, that's even higher than the Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia. Then we said, look, this project has the following components. There is a community development action plan that is supposed to bestow community social services, because we have come into a virgin community in the districts of Nuoya, Apache, and Kiriandongo, and destabilized their way of living. We have attacked Karuma town that was just a little transit port for trucks and where a couple of prostitutes, and now we've turned it into a bustling metropolis. Certain things must give. We must support the local governments in there, provide social services, healthcare, education, and the like. And that money has to be part of the. Then there is the usual corporate social responsibility. Then there are environmental engagements that you must also finance. Then you must create certain infrastructure, because you're breaking some infrastructure and creating other infrastructure. So the project does a lot more than fix turbines along running water. So people must appreciate that when we say we are building a road, we are dressing up this road more than simply that. We are tarmacking, yes, the usual engineering that goes into construction of a road, but we are creating other amenities so that a woman who gets a stall that she would never have had as a result of a road project will jealously guard a road from which she knows her livelihood depended. That's what we want to believe. You create the sense of inclusion and ownership so that young people, that's the skilling center we're talking about. What we have is a growing population of young people, but many of them do not have the requisite skills for the kind of labor that is required of them in the future. So when such projects come up and create skilling centers where we are training them in more ways than the theory that we had in schools, many of us, then you are building a population that's going to be able to be self-sustaining. So the roads projects are more than just tarmac on the roads. They are creating a certain ecosystem of self-reliance and ownership.
Definitely. And speaking of vendors and hawkers, there's been a lot of hula baloo about them, especially last year, since many of them were removed off the street as per KCCA's Smart City campaign. And as that project is in commencement, what is their fate this year?
When you use the word fate, it's like you have condemned them to a hellish existence. Let's say, what is it next for them? And guess what? Many of them are watching you on TV from the comfort of wherever. They are saying, look, we were hawkers, we were vendors in very undignified circumstances, running around and plying our trade on the streets under the scorching sun. Many of us were on verandas or buildings being kicked by those that have shops right behind us, our landlords. When the weather changed, we always had to run with our wear. But government, and through KCCA, there is a huge plan. Recently, when the president was directing KCCA to take over the management of city markets, they said, beyond this, please, can you get financing and build at least 2 markets in every division to accommodate these vendors and hawkers that you kicked off the street and many others that are joining. And before that, we had acquired some land along the northern bypass near Chevando there, which we're trying to make, habitable for them. We're only constrained by finances to ensure that we give them that area and allow them to operate. But we're also cognizant of the fact that when we looked into these markets that we now are superintending over, most of these markets were at less than 60% occupant. I mean, it's like having a hotel with 100 rooms and only 60 can be occupied.
How is that so? Because they look overly congested to
surprisingly
many of the viewers' eyes.
You'll be surprised that when you get down, for example, to Wandegea Market and you go up to the top floor, some floors are literally empty and the shops are closed with padlocks, because we had the challenge of people who took up more stores than they want, and then they were prohibitively charging rental fees and all that. They were running a little government within a government facility, and all that we are putting to an end by way of creating our own management system as KCCA. And that's one of the reasons why we took over these markets, because there was a lot of parasitism coming in from a cartel of people that had turned themselves into landlords of these markets, yet they are government facilities. And hence disenfranchising most people that would otherwise be in these spaces and sending them on the streets as hawkers and vendors. So we are saying, no, let's equitably distribute these available spaces for starters. And we are surprised that there is plenty of space and many people are taking them up because they are now affordable for them. So the streamlining of the management of city markets, there are 16 of them that are owned by the government in Kampala, has to a great extent sucked in the otherwise hopeless group of people that were known as vendors and hawkers that did not have where to ply their goods. You will agree with me, Bruno, and many of you who are watching us this morning, that to feel nice about a city, yes, I'm not trying to sound callous to those that ply their trade, the mama with her child on the back that is trying to fend for her with the mangoes on the street and the like, but she can do it in a more dignified manner if she has a permanent stall somewhere. And also, as she does that, you, Bruno, will feel more comfortable walking on a Kampala street that is clear and decongested of the menace of vendors and hawkers pulling you and shoving you left, right, and center, trying to attract you to their wares. So, that space is being provided. We also have had some private individuals that had bare land in the city, for example, down in Kisenyi. One has offered that land to government. I think there is negotiations going on as to the cost of taking it up again to accommodate hawkers and vendors. So there is a continuous effort to try and ensure that we create trading spaces that are dignified in a manner for our hawkers and street. There was a time when we had degazetted this road right outside your office, Dusty Street into Loom Street, for Sundays to be the place where hawkers just pour their wear, and we know that that becomes a bazaar of sorts, and it was quite a spectacle on Sundays. So those are things that keep us awake, try to see where can we degazette so that we allow maybe a weekly market where, you know, vendors and hawkers can pick their merchandise, storm the streets, vend, and our city dwellers know that on this Sunday, between this hour and this hour, when we go to this street, you're going to ensure that you're going to, because there are also some of us who love to shop in such an environment. Rather than walking into an arcade and, you know, getting bored, you want to go on the street and bargain to the last hilt. So all that keeps us going. What's for sure, as I conclude on this point, Bruno, is that whereas on one hand we are running a smart city campaign, and one of the tenets being decongestion of the city and trying to ensure that the city is to the greatest extent of nice that we'll be proud to work and live in, we are also cognizant of the well-being of our people, right from the corporates in their green and lush offices down to the mama that is holding a basket of ripe bananas and trying to make a living for the day's meal.
Definitely, and it is good to see that the plight of the people, especially of us as city dwellers, is front and center in the minds of KCCA. Something that caused a bit of stirring last year was the issue of border regulation and the census, the registration. So as far as borders are concerned, how are they going to their operations going to look like this year, as far as KCC is concerned?
Let me ask you, Bruno. When you especially approach the Kitgum House Junction, any time of the day, even night, let's even assume you stand on top of Kitgum House and just decide for 10 minutes to watch the happenings at that junction. What do you see?
Chaos.
And that put it in bold, uppercase, and red font. Chaos. Is that the kind of city you want to be proud to live in?
Of course not.
And there are signalized lights?
Yes.
Traffic wardens?
Yes.
From KCCA? And traffic police officers?
Yes.
What causes the chaos? Borders.
Borders.
So don't you agree that there ought to be some level of regulation? Don't you think that we have become so lazy as a people? Little wonder I am this size. I used to be a young, skinny, lanky guy simply because I used to walk at least some distance from my home to point zero where I pick a taxi. Now, you want the border to pick you literally from your bedroom and drive you up the 13th floor of Church House because you don't even want to do the leg work to move around. So borders have become a necessary evil, especially so because of our lifestyle. But as them being facilitators of our sedentary lifestyle to provide it's very interesting. They have become a necessary evil to fend for our sedentary life by providing mobility. Can you see the oxymoron in it? Our sedentary life to provide easy mobility. Then they are all over the place like a bad rush and inconveniencing us and themselves and becoming such an eyesore to the city. And this, without a doubt, the city management cannot just turn a blind eye and say there ought to be some level of regulation. You as a media houses in Uganda, by the time I started doing the kind of work that you are doing, there were about only 2 TV stations in this country. Right now, every channel you flip, there's a TV station. You are in your hundreds. But you are not chaotic because there is a regulator in UCC that regulates your business. If you flip the channels of your radio between the channel FM of 80 up to 90, you'll find a myriad radio stations, but none overlaps the other because there is a regulator. Every business has a trading license. It is regulated. There are thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of schools, but they are not running roughshod because there is a regulator. We are all here as Christians. But I think the reason why we're not going around with machetes killing each other is because there is a level of regulation of morals by the church and other moral bearers. Why then should an industry, pivotal as it may be, like the border, not be regulated by the city authority? And there was a unanimous answer from not just folks like you who use them, folks like ourselves who should regulate them, but also themselves as players in their own industry to say, we need to be regulated. Hence, the call for a census. Because you can't regulate what you do not know in terms of numbers. And we called upon them and said, come, register with us. Just tell us who you are. How many are you? The government carries out planning. Right now we're in the National Development Plan. But that planning cannot be done without a census. You need to know how many citizens are within the geographical area called Uganda. How many Ugandans are they even in the diaspora? For us to start planning for them. When we called on the borders, they heeded our call with some mixed feelings. Of course, there were elements of politics that came in to derail them, and that you cannot wish away in the management of society. There will always be elements that are for and against. And so we received about less than 5,000 registered borders in terms of our census. Don't you agree that there is possibly maybe 5 times as much?
Indeed.
Perhaps even more. But we as KCCA, the ones we know, those who came forward, we will plan for those. We will plan for them in the sense of creating stages, gazetted stages. We will also map out certain routes within the city that are border areas, border no-go areas, because it just cannot be rough show that you go everywhere. Like I said, I swear to you, one of these days you walk into the lift of Church House and find a guy with his border in there because he simply just wants to be with it. There's no regulation unless we come in to regulate. So, but we also realize that of the 5,000 that came forth, many of them are shackled by certain non-conformities. Some have not gone through adequate training. They just simply jumped on a bike, a two-wheeler, picked up a few basics from a friend over here, and just went on the road. We are saying, look, we're going to take you through proper training. And we already collaborated with some training schools, and that training is actually underway, going to conclude this month. We are also going to ensure that we give them the requisite paperwork that they need and have them legit. Just like an employee of Family TV, you must have a work ID, you must have a file in your HR. There must be something that identifies you as belonging to the Church of Uganda Family TV. Not so. Mm-hmm. Likewise, the border operators in the city must have that level of identification, that kind of tagging. We plan for them. So that in case there is any engagement that possibly goes south, we are able to work backwards and we're able to give you some kind of recourse or remedial assistance, you as a rider, but also your passengers that you take. That process is currently going on, and we are hoping that perhaps by the end of this quarter, in this year, then we will announce what ought to be done. But you see, we are running many balls in the air. Yes, you are trying to regulate borders, but you have roads that are not border worthy. Then you say, but borders are not road worthy. So we have to ensure that we run multiple barrel, go through the process of regulation, and ensure that we also create the right infrastructure for them to be at. I mean, if you're going to say, we need you to be gazetted stages, but the stages are not properly built. For example, when it rains, and you visit a petrol station within the city, Total, just down the road here, opposite Uganda House, it becomes like a high school dining hall the day they have cooked a special meal. Why borders have all gathered under the canopy? Because wherever they are running their stages, poor guys have no proper stages with canopies covering them. We're going to give them dignified working spaces so that they are able to be there, come rain, come shine. They're able to be there so that you're able to find them there as opposed to them marauding all over the streets. So there's quite a lot of work that's going to be done in that area. Why aren't we concluding on the work? 3 reasons. 1, budget. 2, budget. 3, budget. You know that the country continues to be shackled with the absence of enough financing to facilitate all our needs, and KCCA is not an island in this whole mix of things. So, for example, in road maintenance, some of the reasons why our roads are in the kind of state they are in is because we've not been able to get enough budget, or even anything close to enough, to rehabilitate these roads regularly as they should. For example, from our road network, we require, give and take, about 100 billion every year work on these roads. But guess how much we got this financial year? 26 billion. Before it was 70. It was not enough, but was close to 100, which we required. Now they cut that to 26, simply because the national kitty is small. So on one hand, we are with our hands tied to the back in a boxing ring with Mike Tyson. What do you expect? We'll come out with boulders on our heads. And those are the potholes you see on our roads today.
And one of the big questions concerning border regulation is, so 5,000 registered, but like we agreed, less than 5,000. Like we agreed, there are more than times 5 that amount, even times 10. What is going to happen to those who have not registered?
So if you do not have a license to operate a TV, what happens to you? Even if you have equipment?
You don't operate.
Thank you.
Wow,
and let us not try to be nice, say, oh, now Bambi, Kakati, now. Let people understand. I mean, Bruno, what's your dream car?
Well, there are so many.
I know your dream car is to be, okay, for me, it's a G65 AMG Mercedes-Benz. Have I died because I don't have it? I am on a journey to acquire it. I have to go through it. And guess what? I have the opportunity to get it by walking downstairs at the bank that you have in this building and putting the managers there at gunpoint, and I rob that bank. But I know robbing a bank is against basic morals. I know that there are repercussions for robbing a bank, especially if you do it unsuccessfully. So likewise, if you did not register, even after the clarion call, why do you expect to get preferential treatment? Bruno, do you ever take time to travel out of the city?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize that a journey of, say, 5 kilometers within the city could cost you about 3,000 shillings on a border?
Yes.
Take the same 5 kilometers journey from Urukunjiri towards Bugangari, where I come from. They will charge you 15,000. You know why?
Why?
Not because the place is terrible and you're going down the escarpment of a Rift Valley. It's because the borders are few. There is scarcity, that's why the demand is high. So if you are here, you go and operate in Urukunjiri, you will find passengers there. You also go to Urukunjiri, go to Mbarara, go to Apache, go to Nabelbo. Let us, because all of us who are riding borders in this city, you can't claim we are all city borns. If you've been up country, especially for Christmas, you saw them in their droves, borders riding back to their cradles. How about setting up base there as well? Because after all, let's spread thin. This is our country, Uganda. Yes, the bulk of the GDP is made here in Kampala. But Kampala cannot be the wild, wild west. There has to be a certain level of regulation and all. But also there can be some level of diversification. Many of them are in the border business for lack of what else to do. And yet they possibly have a lot more potential in else as opposed to border riding. So maybe it also gives them an opportunity to do some kind of introspection, say, but okay, other than border, what else can I do? And you'll be surprised at how ingenious the human mind is, especially if you're faced with a challenge.
Well, it's a stark reality for many, especially for those who did not register during the census. Now, very quickly, unfortunately, when you're having a good discussion, time really runs out quickly. But something I would like you to tackle before we leave is the plight of children under street situations. That it's a continued problem here in Kampala, and for the many that are removed off the street and rehabilitated by KCCA, more are added to the street. So this year, how can KCCA tackle that issue effectively?
I like when you said those who are removed by KCCA. Bruno, the word is not removed. At KCCA, we use the word rescued. These children are not on the street out of their own love for being on the street. That's why when we remove them from the street, we say we are rescuing them from an unfortunate situation they find themselves in. They are there because certain kingpins have brought them there to use and abuse them as begging machines, robbing them of their childhood, their dignity, and even, sadly, their future. Now, we have the Kampala Capital City Child Protection Ordinance of 2020, which clearly stipulates that children should not be on the street. But more importantly, there are punitive measures for you, Bruno, who out of your Christian values thinks that the child begging on your door needs food, and so you give them food and money. By doing so, you are not actually solving your problem. You are incentivizing them to return to the street. And we are saying, no, do not, because they have where they are coming from. And they are there because some people are using them as begging machines. And if the law catches up with you giving them food, we also subject you to a punitive sentence if we catch you, and we have caught some. So yes,
well, that is hitting the tail of a snake. How
that is treating going to the symptom without looking at the cause.
How is KCCA going to hit the head, because the head is those kingpins that are bringing these children to work on the streets?
Now that's what I was coming to. That you see, what you see on the street as street children and the menaces which they create is a symptom of a bigger problem, and solving that problem at its grassroots cannot be the responsibility solely of KCCA. That's why we're working in partnership with other government agencies. Some are law enforcement, others are in fact even churches and family institutions to say, look, these children are coming from somewhere, they are coming from disjointed, their parents are using them for pecuniary gain. Can we speak unto them and say, look, we need to solve this problem? First, get law enforcement to ensure that we carry out, a bikwekweto to stop them from coming where they come from. Instead, they come from one geographical location, you'll be surprised. And we know the place, and we try as much as possible, but you should see the way in which they're trafficked into the city. It's clearly mafioso style. When we've rescued them, we've been able to rehabilitate them in some places, like Masulita has been very kind to offer us their facility. But guess what? Like you said, for one guy you rescue off the street, 10 others arrive. So we are overwhelming Masulita. We did overwhelm Masulita. There's another place called Koblin in northeastern Uganda, which is a youth rehabilitation center. We have also overwhelmed them with numbers. And well, the many that we've taken that have overwhelmed these numbers are few in comparison to those that remain on the streets. But we are not negating our responsibility. We shall continue carrying out these rescue missions and continue to enforce that ordinance on child protection to ensure that now we also start making sure that their living on the street becomes a hellish existence from our end. That we even catch you who provide them with incentives and food. We catch their parents. We catch everyone, so that we make it very difficult and very unprofitable to have those children on the street. But that we are not relenting, because street children are a menace at all levels. Forget about the crime that you think they will bestow onto them. You as a parent, I don't know if you are, you wouldn't wish that they're going through on your own child, even the child of your own enemy. So we are saying as KCCA, let us save these children from being used and abused by very mean-hearted, in fact, almost animalistic members of our public.
Definitely. Please share with us your final remark as far as KCCA's plans for this year, and what you'd like us as city dwellers to participate in when it comes to whatever plans KCCA has in store for us this year.
One thing is for sure is that KCCA, someone says, how do you guys even wake up in the morning to come City Hall and do nothing? And I have to tell this person, we don't actually wake up because we don't sleep. We keep awake because of the challenges this city has bestowed unto us, and the responsibility we have as KCCA to try and ameliorate these challenges for the city dwellers. But the city dwellers also have a certain level of responsibility, and that's what I always want to challenge you, folks who are glad to have the platform like you have, over microphone and cameras, to try and preach unto our city dwellers. That is one thing KCCA giving you the amenities that you crave for. But you as a city dweller, what are you contributing to this? Are you contributing via vandalism, that you're stealing manhole covers, then your child falls in them, then you cry and make noise on social media how KCCA lives gaping manholes? But who steals them? Are you the one participating in stealing street lights complete with their solar panels and their batteries? Are you the same person that is throwing garbage on sidewalks and throwing plastic bottles out of your car that are clogging our drainage channels? Are you the same person contributing to the flooding of this city by reclaiming wetlands that are naturally supposed to be sieves for our water to run off into the lake? What is your level of responsibility? Are you the one just indiscriminately urinating on walls on buildings? I mean, for whatever you ask from KCCA as a city dweller, there is an equal responsibility on your part to also provide a certain level of decency. Let us not ask for a first world city with mannerisms from third world. Many of us have left our villages, but the villages never left us. I think you're in the city, you're asking for first world services as if you're in New York, but you're behaving like a barbarian from Bugangari. No. I mean, there has to be an element where we behave like city dwellers, and the city will come to us. So, unless we carry out that level of brutal honesty and personal introspection and say, I will look into myself and ask myself, am I behaving as a true Munachibuga? Then I will have the moral authority to demand for better services from our city authorities. If you are evading taxes, You do not want to pay your property rates. You are run. Yes, of course, there are those who argue that, okay, when we have paid, what have you used the money for? That's a different debate. You do your part, then you now hold those responsible to the greatest level of accountability.
Thank you so much, Mr. Simon Peter, for addressing all these critical issues. And we hope indeed for many of us that it will be a fruitful year as Kampala city dwellers and as KCCA, who has the mandate to ensure that our dwelling here is fruitful and profitable. And thank you for joining us on Issues at Hand this day. We continue to talk about pertinent issues in our society. But for now, it's time for us to get into a coffee break. Have a lovely day. God richly bless you.